Namaste. I'm Ashwin. I teach physics in Chennai. My area of expertise lies in teaching physics from fundamental concepts. And once you understand the fundamental concepts, I take you into deeper problem solving strategies. It is easier to approach tougher and deeper conceptual problems once you have a good understanding of concepts, and you will be able to look at these problems with much more clarity. Hey guys, subscribe to my channel, click the subscribe button and make sure to click the bell icon to get updates of all the videos that I post. After watching my previous video on time and time management, some messaged me asking to make an exclusive video on physics. So I thought that I'll make a video on last year's physics board exam paper asked in CBSE in the month of March in the year 2020. This year saw a new pattern being introduced in the CBSE board paper. Now, this change in pattern was done by CBSE to make the board papers more in lines with competitive examinations. They had introduced multiple type questions with 4 options given. And if you look at the competitive exams for engineering and medicine after class 12, the questions are invariably multiple choice based. So CBSE has introduced from this year onwards multiple choice questions to make the board paper in lines with the competitive examinations. Now coming to the marks of the board exam paper, 70 marks were allotted for theory and 30 marks were allotted for the practicals. That was as usual which happened in the past years. Now in terms of the exact pattern of the paper, the 70 marks which the students had to write and submit the paper, which was the theory aspect. 20 marks were for 1 marks, that is 21 mark questions were tested. 7 2-mark questions were tested. 7 3-mark questions were tested, and 3 5-mark questions were tested. Now in these 21 mark questions, 10 questions were multiple choice based. 5 questions were fill in the blank types, and 5 questions students had to write answer in 1 line. So that comprised 20 questions in section A. Section B had like 7 2-mark questions. Section C had 7 3-mark questions, and section D had 3 5-mark questions. Now coming to internal choices. Now internal choice is something where 2 questions will be given, and students have to write answer to either one of the 2 questions that is tested. So that is what internal choice means. Now in the multiple choice there were no internal choices. In fill in the blank type there was 1 question in which there was internal choice. In answer in 1 sentence type question there was 1 internal choice, and out of the 7 2-mark questions, 2 questions had internal choice. Out of the 7 3-mark questions, 1 question had an internal choice, and out of the 3 5-mark questions, every question had an internal choice. Now the idea behind giving internal choice in all the 3 5-mark question is that suppose a student doesn't know or hasn't so thoroughly read the entire subject of physics, all the chapters haven't been thoroughly studied. In that case, if there is no internal choice and 1 question appears from a particular chapter which the student hasn't focused much, and the student would be losing a large amount of marks. that is a huge amount of weightage, that is 5 marks would be lost. So all the 3 questions had internal choices. This pattern change is a very good move, and it's a very welcome move which the CBSE board has introduced this year. Students who are conceptually prepared were able to answer questions and score high marks, rather than students who just memorized and learnt things by rote. So rote learning did not fetch very high marks in this CBSE examination. So students who had learnt the subject conceptually, they had a edge over students who had just prepared by learning by rote and memorizing, learning the derivations, drawing diagrams, labeling the diagrams and presenting things by learning theory, learning to solve numerical problems. So those things had a very high weightage, but there were nice conceptual questions that were tested in the paper, which gave an edge to students who had prepared conceptually for the examination. Now, before I talk about the difficulty level of the paper, there were some major changes in terms of the syllabus of physics for 12th board. So, I will first talk about the syllabus changes and how the syllabus changes had impacted the difficulty level of the paper. There is a chapter called Communication Systems, which is completely theoretical. A lot of uh, uh, things to memorize. The students had to know about, although it's a very interesting chapter and has a lot of practical applications, but students need to remember a lot of facts in this particular chapter. It was more on testing the memory of students. Questions will be framed from this particular chapter, and that chapter was completely removed. The next part is on semiconductors, a huge part called transistors. Now, that part was completely removed out from the CBSE 12th physics board paper this year. Now, usually this is the chapter that students find it very difficult to understand things conceptually. In fact, there are a lot of intricate aspects and a lot of intertwined things which comprise transistors. So, transistors was removed out from this year's board exam paper, and students who have opted for CBSE will only be learning about transistors in their colleges. If they are going to be choosing engineering stream, especially electrical engineering, students would learn about transistors. Now, removing the part of transistors, generally what students do is they feel majority 95% of students, they don't understand this part conceptually. It is too intricate for them to relate a lot of intertwined concepts and understand the chapter with conceptual understanding. So generally what they do, usually a 3 mark or 5 mark question is tested from transistors in board exam papers. So students will memorize a particular part of transistors, and usually question appears from that particular area, and they answer it and get those 3 or 5 marks. So that particular part was removed from this year's board exam paper. And then there is a third chapter called logic gates. Now, logic gates is actually very logical. There is nothing to memorize. There is nothing to just learn by rote. In fact, it's a very easy chapter. Now, that chapter is also there in computer science, as well as it is there in maths by the name of Boolean algebra. Exact same ideas. So there was no need to include it in physics as well when it is already part of maths as well as part of computer science. So there's no need to include it in physics as well. So that is the rationale behind removing it from physics. So removal of these parts, which were largely theoretical and the students had to memorize and then present it in the board paper. Now those chapters, since they were removed, now questions that appeared from these chapters, they had to be replaced from some other areas. So what CBSE board did is they replaced these theoretical questions with a lot of conceptual questions. So this year board paper saw good amount of around, depending upon which set you had, around 8 to 10 marks of questions were really conceptual. Only students who understood the subject conceptually will be able to understand will be able to answer these questions. So to really fetch a high marks like 95 or 90 to 95 plus marks, it is very essential that this time students had to understand the subject conceptually. And those who had just learnt by looking at the previous year's board exam papers or learned the derivations. Yes, it is important. Those parts did appear. Derivations where there were questions where you had to draw diagrams, you had to write definitions, you had to go about explaining experiments. Yes, these parts were all part of this year's board exam paper. But this year's board exam paper also saw an increase in the amount of conceptual questions that were being tested. And students who understood things conceptually were able to do very well in this year's board examination physics.